Okay, we're going to change tact yet again. We'll get young Toby Potter back up on stage. Please welcome Toby to the stage. Alex Donald, Head of Funds Research of Ironbark, and Matt Hattersley, Head of Dealer Group Service and Engagement, SQM. Welcome, gents. Fireside chat, please. Grab a seat. The mics are working. Okay.
Now, look, it's my pleasure to host this session, and I chose to take this session and to invite these two to speak to it because they're going to be serving you lunch. They're going to start serving lunch in about 15 minutes. So I needed to know that the two people who were speaking during this session had voices sufficiently loud and had sufficiently thick skins not to mind that you're all tucked into lunch as it appears. So what we're going to talk about really in this session picks up on the last points which came out of the immediately previous session of okay, so we want to present to our clients that the portfolios that I'm recommending to you are ours, that I as the advisor, we as an organisation believe in this. This is what we believe in. This is the articulation of our view. So we're going to make our managed account portfolio our, essentially the embodiment of our investment philosophy, and we've these issues of investment philosophy statements and a process have come up continuously through the sessions this morning. What we have on the stage though are two organisations who represent more than any others, organisations who take responsibility for oversight and view of the resourcing and capacity that's required to turn that aspiration to be a portfolio manager, to be a wealth manager, to offer MDA or SMA portfolios, to turn that aspiration into reality. So what we're going to do is Matt Hattersley from SQM is going to talk through the process that SQM applies to researching multi-asset class managed account portfolios, which are the managed account portfolios that they focus on. And then Alex is going to talk about the role of Ironbark as an RE, since it's responsible for approving many of the portfolios that are offered on platforms and the process that they go through. And you'll see that the two processes of research and approval are substantially analogous. So we'll take a few minutes for Matt to go through the SQM process, and then we'll talk about Ironbark and its approach.
Thanks, Toby. May I have the clicker,
Big
please?
button.
The big button. Fantastic. Let's see. Oh, it does work. Great. What I'm going to look at today, and I've got a number of slides here that I'll run through quite quickly. There's one I'll pause on towards the end. Mainly for you, of course, as you revisit these slides, as you download them later, you can have a look. But what I first just wanted to cover, and this slide and the next one really cover that, is that, of course, we've been around now for about 15 or 16 years, and a lot of people still see us or think of us as a property rating house, and that's how we began back in 2007. But very much changed our focus in 2015, where we started rating more or the other funds across all the asset classes, and you can certainly see the growth in the coverage that we've had over the past several years as we've done that. And a significant jump though in 2021 as we started to see the number of multi-asset products come to market, particularly in the multi-asset SMA space. And given our structure that we don't do any consulting or asset management functions in their business, we've been perceived by the market as having a lot less conflict there. And so it's been really great to see the growth that we've actually had in the number of multi-asset SMAs that we've been able to rate. So here's our split across all the asset classes. And within the multi-asset category, those 180-ish products, there are from around about 30 suites of SMAs across, from quite a number of managers, big institutions, as well as a few advice dealer group portfolios as well. But we do manage funds across all the asset classes. Now, importantly, in assessing the products that we do rate, whether it is a multi-asset or a single sector strategy, we have a very defined and focused rating process. And that we see as critical to be able to assess each strategy. And for our clients, the advisors and platforms that utilise our research as a part of their governance processes, to have that comfort that there is a consistency in that process, that you can compare Fund A with Fund B or Strategy A with Strategy B. Ultimately, in the drill down in how we get there, we have a rigorous, qualitatively driven process, really looking at 37 aspects of the portfolio construction process. We have the subdivision categories there that we look at. We don't equally weight those because we don't think they're all as important as each other. But the top three categories there are our top weighted across each of the categories. People making up 25% of our assessment criteria, not just who the people are, but how they interact with each other, the governance within the business and around the process of the portfolio construction process, the business, how strong that business is, how much capital they have in the business. Are they going to be around in 3 to 5 years, still looking after your client's money? Of course, key, the philosophy and process that is followed. So each of those, altogether, the top three make up 65% of our assessment criteria. Then, of course, the product features, portfolio construction, and ultimately risk return, which really is only a 10% weighting in our scoring because, if you've got the top categories right, the rest should follow. And our assessment really is whether or not we believe a fund is resourced and structured in a way to deliver consistently on its objectives.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Now, Alex, advice groups come to you and say, right, we'd like to run SMAs, we'd like to run a program of these on this or that platform. So what's the process that Ironbark then apply to saying, yep, that's one we could support, or no, that's not?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know, so we as Toby mentioned, we run a responsible entity service which is piped into all the major managed account platforms in the market, and we work with licensees who want to build managed accounts on normally multiple platforms. And so we don't sort of tend to find people turn up to us with a preset, pre-built model. We actually work with the clients to get them from, they may already have a very significant governance framework and a process and so on, or we work directly with clients to build that out for them. But I think really it's when you're looking at, from our perspective, you're then in a product structure. So in an RE, in an SMA rather than an NDA, you're in a product structure. There's liability associated with that. So we look at all the things that SQM would look at, people, process, and really that's very focused on the investment management capability, because the primary role that we appoint is the model manager. Now that may be the licensee, it may be their investment committee, and so the focus will be on the investment management capability within that. It may be another entity, it may be a consultant, it may be somebody else. So that's where that focus is. But then the other areas of risk and therefore liability in the structure is then obviously in things like execution. So we'll look at execution very closely. How are people doing pre and post trade compliance? How do they have an institutional grade structure around managing the portfolios within guidelines, the compliance around it, the execution, those types of things. So for us as a product offerer, which is effectively what we are, it's not just the investment piece, it's also all of that compliance and trading and execution that goes around it.
And so approximately what's the sort of FUM that you're now the RE for, and do you have any idea of how many SMAs that represents?
I don't know how many models it is.
Yeah.
It's about 40 clients, I think. Chris from Ironbark's in the he's nodding at me. So I think it's about 40 clients, but it's a substantial amount of money. So it's about $25 billion.
Right.
And I think just from our clients today, that will double.
Yeah.
So these are, as you know, they build managed accounts and they fund over many years as you take them to clients. But our fund will double just with those.
Yep.
Just with those existing clients. But we're seeing clients all the time. And they vary from people that want to really build it themselves and have investment capability in-house, all the way through to using a kind of off-the-shelf, option delivered by a consultant or another entity.
So one of the things we've seen in the growth of managed accounts over the last decade or so has been that because they are a creation of the advice profession, not much more than the investment management, is we've seen multi-asset class portfolios being the real driver of managed accounts. So obviously that requires the greatest breadth of investment expertise. I mean, you're not just saying, I know about Aussie equities or I know about fixed income, whatever it might be. So what's the sort of depth of resourcing that you'd expect to see from somebody who fronts up and says, right, well, we want to put out a suite of, as Findex have, 7 risk profiles and, multi-asset class. So what would you expect to see in terms of resourcing for that across all asset classes?
It varies depending on the strategy and what their objective is. Certainly a fund that is just going to be largely a set and forget asset allocation is potentially going to need less resources than a fund that has maybe a more tactical bias on a regular basis. So really those sorts of things are where we look at. We also look very favourably at those firms that actually use external parties as a core part of their governance, whether it be external REs or external other compliance providers in their business, because we know that gives their process a lot more rigour.
And Alex, from your point of view?
Very, very similarly. I mean, I think maybe give an example. Across those 40 clients, invariably I'd say 98% of them use a consultant. So I think you've got to have access to a significant manager research pool, and that's not in the majority of cases is done with a consultant or somebody that has a team of people that do that. And so that's the usual model. We do have one very large managed account which is run by Viridian.
Right.
And they have a large internal CIO office where they do.
Yeah, Piers and his team have won the IMAP Managed Account Award. So look, your judgment is obviously excellent.
But they run everything from direct equities in Aussie equities all the way through the asset classes. But I can't remember how big Piers' team is, but it's it's sort of 10 strong across all those places. So I think that gives you a reflection of if you want to do it in house, and they're $4 billion I think or close to, so they're quite significant. But direct equities all the way through. But the majority of people are a licensee investment committee with people that understand their clients, how they want to build the portfolios for their clients, partnered with one of the.
And we heard Matthew just a moment ago saying that if Findex takes in asset allocation advice from State Street Global Advisors, so. So that sort of. So how do you expect to see that sort of balance between the external consultants, the Lonsec's and the Morningstars and the Janas, compared to the sort of internal capacity?
I think it'll continue in the sort of proportions I just mentioned. Right. I think our view is we see most groups who want to build their own managed account tend to be able to put assets of sort of $300 million plus into the managed account. and almost invariably they use an external asset consultant. That's our preference as RE. It is definitely our preference, and I think it makes sense. And so that's. But we see, and the choice of, as you know, of asset consultants has grown significantly over time. We work with most of them.
Yeah. And so, Matt, how does SQM manage this, not exactly conflicts, but the conflict of assessing a managed account program where, a research house is in the mix?
Look, we actually, when I think of the funds we do rate, we've got quite a number of them, particularly those dealer group models that we rate, where they have the consultant with significant experience, at the head of the tree, you might say, bringing it all together, and a number of those are rated quite well. But from a research house perspective, we currently don't rate any of those offered by the other major research houses. We'd love to. I know Lonsec were here. That we'd love them to have their strategies rated. But where you've got 25% of our scoring is delivered on the people, that is critical, that you have that right combination together and you have the right resources there. And I certainly agree with Alex that, that decision whether you do it yourself or purchase one of the quality, solutions that are available from the investment management industry is really going to be an individual business decision, and the scale that you can develop, whether it's cost effective or not to do it one way or the other. Because certainly there is, people for hire out there that actually have the capability and can bespoke a solution for your business. And we've seen that, we heard from Manny at PSK earlier today. They don't necessarily need a rating for their internal, but they've got great capability.
So let's think about the future and where we think the use of managed accounts is going, and the things that will impact on that, particularly with this sort of reference to licensee-based portfolios.
You may have the number, but I sat on a stage at a Morningstar conference about 5 years ago and said my prediction was that 80% of all retail assets would ultimately be in managed accounts, and that was really before a lot of people doing it. But if you look at the UK has 80% of all platform flows go to managed accounts, and I think we're heading there. I can't see. I think for licensees, it's really taken off the understanding of the efficiency it builds in their portfolios, the better client experience they could potentially have around investment decisions and so on. And I think the thing that probably has changed a little bit, which has driven that, probably has been that the smaller offices of licensees could always put off by a lot of the build was tailored managed accounts, which you needed a certain threshold to get to. Now you can use an off-the-shelf managed account, and you can access
for the standard market.
You can. So I think that's there, and I think the other thing we're seeing, which also encourages it, is the specialised managed accounts. So we're starting to see the development of, for instance, unlisted and alternative managed accounts, which may initially be sold just to wholesale clients, but we're starting to see that sophistication bleeding into managed.
And today we've had a number of presenters on the podium here talking about the use of MDAs for their higher net worth clients, because they've created the flexibility and the capacity to use those types of instruments within the portfolios. So any thoughts on DDO and its impact and sort of ASIC's approach to investment markets?
So for those of you who know, DDO is a wonderful thing called design and distribution obligations, and it applies to anyone who offers a financial product in the market. I think everyone who
every registered managed investment, every registered scheme, yes.
And so for us as RE, for all those managed accounts and all those investment options, that covers all of those. And we've been through a process of doing the design and distribution obligations and the disclosure across all those managed accounts. It's been a huge process, and we did a lot of work with ASIC.
Thankfully, we don't have to do that.
But I think what would I say? The process was really interesting, but it's effectively about how are you marketing the product and who are you marketing it to? Is it the right audience, etc.? I think the interesting observation we had was the tailored managed accounts that are built by licensees, where they have committee members that are designing the product for their clients. ASIC and certainly we did found the DDO much smoother because you're aligning the product to the end client. So the more it's tailored, actually, the easier it was, I think, for ASIC to get its head around, rather than a off the shelf, which is offered to a much greater audience.
I was at an ASIC presentation on TMDs and DDO, and I asked the question, TMDs and managed accounts, have you had any problems? Because of course there have been a number of stop orders lately on different types of investment option. To which the off-the-cuff answer from ASIC, I forget which, the lady who heads the investment management team there, her off-the-cuff response was, nope, hasn't been no, we have no concerns, I think were my paraphrase of her words. Nothing's come to our attention in this regard, and it probably speaks to exactly that point.
So, yeah.
Yeah, yep. Okay, so Matt, what's the sort of length of time for the process that somebody would expect to go through if they come to SQM for a rating?
For us to do the rating, it can take anywhere between 6 weeks if they choose us and pay us a little bit extra to conduct the report quickly.
What Matt means is if you pay him a little bit extra. Do this one now. Do this one.
Up to sort of 4 or 5 months, which is normally the duration for when we do the annual renewal of our ratings. It takes us a little bit longer. The urgency isn't there, but a lot of the managers that choose to get their strategies rated often want the rating available sooner rather than later. So do pay the modest premium to get the product rated.
He works for food, by the way.
However, I do have to say, it's interesting when we do a 6-week rating. The fund manager has 2 weeks to complete our questionnaire, and it's interesting that the conversations we have with managers, the delay actually occurs in that first 2 weeks, where it often might take them not quite 2 weeks to complete the survey, maybe 3, maybe 4 weeks, as they find the questionnaire a little bit more, I suppose, challenging for them to complete than they expected, given the depth and the detail that we do actually ask.
Okay, so let's talk about the sort of ongoing process then. Somebody has put themselves through either the RE approval process and or the SQM rating process. They've started to get money in the door. The first, 12 months have gone past. We heard Manny say, right, well, we're up to 12 months now on our managed account. So let's talk about the ongoing oversight and obligations for you, and the way you transfer those back to the portfolio managers, or from SQM's point of view, the durability of an assessment that might be 12 or 15 months old.
Yeah, well, from an RE's perspective, it's quite straightforward, really. So we start the same process. We have sort of questionnaires at the beginning, and we sort of workshop and build with our clients. But we have a whole investment governance team who do all that initial assessment. But they also then sit on the investment committee of every managed account that we are RE for. And they're not there to make investment decisions. In fact, they don't make investment decisions. They are there purely from a governance perspective to support the licensee and whoever's the model manager to, is this fund on the platform? Is it within the guidelines of the IMA of the thing? So we do that. So we have ongoing governance through that thing, and then we have an official annual review of every managed account, which is a refresh of our due diligence that we did at the beginning. Because to your point, the ongoing, structure and capability that's behind the managed account is just as important as the day you build it.
Yeah, and Matt, I mean...
Yeah, our reports have a 12-month lifespan, at which time that they're removed from our system and are no longer valid.
It's like the Mission Impossible telephone tape, isn't it? After 2 minutes, there's a puff of smoke in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we invite the managers, we engage with them, a few months before that expiry date to get them to their intent on renewing that rating, and should they wish to, we basically go through the rating process. It's a little bit easier on their part because they've already filled in the questionnaires and the data requirements, but we go through that annually. But they also have a requirement contractually that should things change during that 12-month period, to engage us and keep us informed of what's going on, because if their capability changes during that time, we need to know so that we can change the assessment that we've got in the market. That happens from time to time.
All right, look, thanks very much. So are there questions from the floor for either Alex or Matt about the process and about your eligibility?
Hi there, thank you guys. Question for Alex, a slightly contentious question, if that's okay, so you're able to
Thanks,
opt out. So as a representative of a large licensee, one thing that we worry about is industry standards, because if there's a chink in the armour, it attracts attention from ASIC, et cetera, right? And kind of extending that further, that applies significantly to, I guess, licensee investment decision quality and governance, and also the quality of the ASIC consultants out there as well. Without mentioning names, are there any examples where Ironbark's just gone, yeah, nah, yeah?
There's a camera up there, so on a no-names basis, yes, there have been a number of occasions where we haven't moved forward with managed accounts, and they're largely based on a couple of things. That's almost entirely based on saying, hey, I don't think where you are with your investment capability and what you're proposing is sufficient for us to act as RE and ultimately take on the liability of the product. But what tends to happen is they go away and think about it and come back. And so we don't tend to have, as you know, we don't tend to have people turn up with fully formed decisions. We then tend to advise and say, well, look, if you did this and you do that, this is what could get you there. But there have been a couple. And there has been a couple where, probably in the early days, where fees were wanting to be attached, and charged within the fund, which is not something which is again, it's something that can be done. But we were, in an environment where you're talking about fee for service. So what's the service being provided? Who's providing it? Are they able to take that fee? Are we as an RE able to pay that fee to that entity? So I think there was a couple of those at the beginning. So it's probably, research capability and then structures around that. We do a lot of work with people to test and think about how they manage conflict within their managed account process and those sorts of things.
Yeah, thank you. Conflicts are what keep us awake at night. So
yeah. Interestingly, because I pay attention to the complaints, because AFCA publish, the complaints that they receive and what the nature of those complaints, and you can't separate SMAs from managed investment scheme complaints generally, because they're all just under the MISs, but MDAs, they do try to have a specific category. There are none, almost none. You look for them. The couple that I've found were misclassified, and there were a couple that were derivative based. So it would appear as though the self-regulatory process that's represented on the stage here, and the platforms, of course, as well in their own right, it appears to be working to the extent that investors don't end up at AFCA going, this is not what I paid for.
I think it's a very high hurdle, the governance within managed accounts. I think there's REs involved. Yep. Most of the products are offered under a superannuation license of one of the platforms. they also do their own due diligence. So there's a pretty significant, most of the funds that are used within it are also MIS schemes that are under Corps Act, and so there are several layers of pretty strong governance in managed accounts.
Through IMAP, in future, amongst the areas that we'll be focusing on are the areas of benchmarking, and in the probably more immediate future, the relevance of APRA's performance tests and the way it might actually have probably an inadvertent outcome for managed accounts. So, other questions before I ask you to put your hands together for our panellists here? Any other? No, look, well, join with me in thanking Matt and Alex for their insights.
Thank you, Toby.